Good morning, friends. I know that last week I said in the blog that we were going to try to have a Lenten theme for the next several weeks, but occasionally an issue arises and a situation arises that I feel like I need to respond to within this video blog format, and today is one of those situations. What I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is going to require me to throw a lot of information at you fairly quickly and a lot of abbreviations at you fairly quickly, and I will try to make it as understandable as possible while maintaining the nuance. But I think it's an issue that we all need to be aware of as advocates, both as folks with diverse embodiment, such as myself and portions of my audience, and as allies and co-conspirators. And I am going to ask you to think about not so much the facts of the particular situation I'm gonna relay, although it's very important and you should hopefully do your research after hearing about it on the blog, but just the mere fact that this conversation is occurring and is happening right now is something I want us to keep in mind, and is probably what I find most alarming. The situation that I'm going to talk about today comes from, I found out about it through a friend who sent me an article from the February 19th Washington Post. And it deals with a proposed law C7 in Canada. And this is a law, or this has to do with the fact that Canada has, as most other developed nations in the world, federal healthcare system that is part of the state, much like in Britain and, like I said, every other developed nation in the world. For clarity of purpose and clarity of content, I believe that we should in America work our way towards something like government funded or government assisted healthcare for those with special needs and for those of diverse embodiment. Especially, I'm not here to debate the merits of that. If you want to do that, contact us at the Julian Way, email me, comments on Julian Way Facebook, get in touch with me another way, and I'd be glad to have that conversation and a good, reasonably spirited debate. What this law C7, proposes to do in Canada has the right or has a provision in its healthcare system called a right to die, meaning that essentially that a doctor in Canada can assist somebody in achieving and working towards a quote-unquote relatively gentle or painless death if there is a reasonable, foreseeable death that would otherwise cause pain and suffering. That's the way the law stands right now. Again, for clarity of purpose and content, I am, as a disabled advocate and a diversely embodied person myself, I have deep reservations about assisted death, medically assisted death, or MAID as it's called. in this article because I believe it can be too easily abused, and I believe that the quality of life debate is too often dominated by those who are able-bodied. So I am generally, because of my Christian faith and my status as a disabled advocate and activist, I am generally against all forms of assisted death on principle. What makes this particular situation so alarming is that this proposed law, C7, would remove the clause that is currently in the law that calls for the establishment of a reasonably certain painful death, which means essentially that anyone with a disabling condition of any sort could ask for a medically assisted death. Now, in fairness, from what I can establish from my research, this stemmed from a lawsuit, a discrimination lawsuit brought by at least one, if not multiple, disabled people that said the clause of that there was a need to establish a reasonably certain painful death was discriminatory, and that disabled people of all stripes should have the right to avail themselves of this medically assisted death. That lawsuit went through, and now Canada is considering this Bill C7, which I said would remove that clause of a reasonably certain death and make the law much more permissible and much more available. What I find so scary about this is the dark side of this story, over and above any objections I have on moral grounds to medically assisted death. Anyway, Canada is not upholding its treaty obligations that it signed when it entered into the United Nations Compact or Committee on the Rights of Disabled People. I don't have the name of that treaty exactly right, but there is a UN treaty that, again, every other country in the Western world almost has signed except the United States, go figure, that dictates that disabled people can live in the community, can have certain rights, can avail themselves of certain liberties and privileges just as any other system. Canada was investigated for not living up to that compact, is the word, for not living up to their obligations on the Compact for the Rights of Disabled People in 2019. Their standards of health and standards of care in institutions for the critically disabled have been found to be wantingly lax, including fecal matter and urine on the floor and bed sheets that aren't changed for weeks, and even in the home care sector, there have been multiple lawsuits brought by disabled people who allege abuse, feeding of rotten food by home care workers, being banged into walls, as one young man who sued put it, by home care workers. And one lawsuit was even brought by a young man who essentially was told by a doctor, you pay us upwards of $8,000, or we can help you and you can avail yourself of medically assisted death, which means Canada is not living up to its treaty obligations, and instead of addressing those things, they are taking the easy way out. And they are offering medically assisted death, and there is great fear among the disability rights community that this relaxing of the imminent death part of the medically assisted death law will lead to pressure from medical doctors and pressure from able-bodied folks for people with disabilities to choose to end their lives rather than make the hard choices and adjust and bring the standards of care in homes and hospitals up to code and up to where they would meet those treaty obligations. So why am I telling you this? I am telling you this because as people of faith, it is our responsibility and our duty to make sure that we treat all life as sacred and inviolable, and that we advocate for quality of life to be defined by the disabled individual themselves. Even if it takes us longer to understand what that means, and even if it doesn't meet a certain arbitrary standard that able-bodied folks might influence or might expect the quality of life question to answer, all life is sacred, and I don't get to determine what your quality of life is, and you, whether you're able-bodied or disabled, do not get to determine what my quality of life is. And in case you think I'm being hysterical and overreacting, we need only to reflect back to the man in San Antonio, Texas, who was got the coronavirus and was, I believe, previously injured in an accident. And because his disability, because a doctor decided that his quality of life was quote unquote impaired or not up to standard anymore, he was allegedly and pretty irrefutably denied care and subsequently died. So these debates are happening here. Belgium and other countries in Europe have had pretty lax assisted suicide or medically assisted death laws for close to 20 years. And as much as I want to endorse someone's autonomy to relieve themselves of pain and to seek to control and manage their life the way they see fit, what we know from the research after tracking nearly 20 years of this, and especially Belgium, is that as these laws have become more lax, these standards of care, which are admittedly more rigorous in Belgium than they are in Canada, the standards of care, even in Belgium, have dropped year over year as the medically assisted death laws have become more permissive. So folks all over the world, seem to be taking the easy way out. Every life is sacred, no matter what the cost. And as much as I believe in the right and the need for state assisted and state subsidized healthcare to fix the woefully inadequate flaws in the United States medical system, the state does not get the right to determine what is and what is not a quality of life, or a life of quality. Be aware. First, Europe, Belgium, and a couple of other countries. And then Canada. Canada's right next door. This isn't a fantasy, folks. This is our life. So, bear witness. Fight for the kind of life you want. And fight for the quality of life and the dignity of life for everyone. Able-bodied, disabled. It doesn't matter. Every life is precious. Thanks, friends. Sorry for the heavier content today. I felt like it was important. Blessings. Bye-bye.